many are still grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective podcast, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm your host and president of Jigsaw Queensland, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating and not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, welcome to Adopt Perspective. I'm your host, Jo Sparrow. Today's guest, Alison Willoughby, was born at the Royal Women's Hospital in Carlton, Melbourne in 1965, where she was the first child adopted into a family that would go on to adopt 3 more children. Alison has connected with both her mother, father, and additional siblings, and has written a book about her experience called Forced Adoption, a Memoir. Welcome to Adopt Perspective, Alison. I'm so happy to have you join us.
Oh, hi, Jo. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You're welcome. And I have to tell you that with your book, I was away, was it last weekend or the week? No, maybe the weekend before, actually, with friends. And I should have been enjoying my time with them. And instead, I was on the couch reading your book. I kept getting interrupted when I started it. And so I was really only about a chapter in when I arrived there, and I'd finished it before I'd left. So
wow. How long were you away for?
2 days.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. It must have been compelling.
It was good. I must have been, I'll be evicted from my friend group, but I did enjoy the read.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Alison, could I start by asking you to share with us what it was like for you to grow up adopted?
Sure. So I was always told that I was adopted. Mum and Dad couldn't have biological children of their own. And originally they wanted 4 girls. And I was first, and then, as you said, I was followed by 3 more. And it was kind of like, I guess I asked lots of questions, especially when my youngest brother was adopted, because I was 5. So I was a bit more aware, and I was sort of understanding that friends at school, their mums would be pregnant and having big tummies, and then they'd have babies, but we were trotting off to the hospital and bringing babies home, so I was asking lots of questions. And I think, the dialect that our adoptive parents were given, oh, you were the chosen one, or, Mum used to say to me, oh, there were rows and rows of little girls and there were so many of them and we chose you, And so for me, that was beautiful, and I just accepted being adopted. And there were a couple of kids in primary school that were adopted. Not that we ever spoke about it, because no one really did, but just knew that there were others there. But I guess primary school, maybe later in like grade 5, grade 6, it kind of dawned on me that our family was really different, and I didn't resemble any member of my family. We all look so different. And I didn't really, of course, didn't understand the genetic makeup and how that would differ with all of us. And I'd look at my friends and I would consciously search for traits that were alike, and I almost became obsessed with that. I think I actually did become obsessed with that, just this absolute necessity to try and look at other people and say, well, you've got her nose and you've got her eyes, and all my friends just looked so much like either their mother or their sister, and so I started to feel a little bit alienated at that point. And I really started to feel like I would reflect and look at our family and think, well, none of us are alike. There's no similarity. We don't look like a real family. I can remember saying in my head all the time, but we're not a real family. We're not a real family. No one ever said that to me, but it's the story that I created in my head, you know. So, and I guess it intensified as I grew older, being adopted. And when I went to high school, there were 2 girlfriends that were adopted, and that was amazing. And I became best friends with one of them. And her and I were inseparable for 4 years while we were at school. And I write about her in my book as well. But then again, still, we didn't talk about it. We still, at that point, nobody knew anything about our biological origins. You know, everything was kept from us. And so it wasn't spoken about at length. It was just like, oh, yeah, I'm adopted too. Oh, wow, you know. And I don't even remember saying, do you feel alienated, or do you feel like you're not a real family? I don't even remember that conversation. Mm-hmm. So it's evolved a lot since then. Yeah.
It's so strange, isn't it, how we just don't talk about adoption with other adoptees, even when we're younger, or a lot of the time. I can't speak for everyone, but I had people in my family who were adopted, 3 cousins, and then eventually a niece and a nephew, and we just really didn't talk about it. And I kind of wanted to, but I had a feeling that I would maybe get in trouble, not from my parents, but maybe from theirs, because it was not spoken about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would have been so helpful.
Oh, yeah. If only we'd been told, hey, it's okay to talk about it. I mean, if I ever brought it up with Mum, she would openly tell me as much as she knew. But I guess then too, I just wasn't asking the questions that I would ask as a mature person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you did feel that the curiosity you had, even though you didn't talk about it a lot, was supported by your parents?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, Dad wasn't we didn't discuss things with Dad, really. I wasn't close to my father. I was extremely close to Mum, more so in the latter years. And she was always, my mum was very supportive of me, no matter what I did, no matter what I chose to do or what adventure I wanted to embark on. She was always so supportive. And I can talk about the reunion later and how she supported me in that. But yeah, she was wonderful.
In your book, Alison, you write about domestic abuse occurring in your adoptive family and your strategies to survive this as you grew up, and how it impacted you. Would you mind sharing a little about this with us?
Sure, Jo. It was a very traumatizing childhood. I don't like to use that word traumatizing because it almost makes me feel like I'm a victim, and I don't want to. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. But we did have a lot of domestic violence from my father. And he was from Holland. He grew up in the war. He had a very tough childhood himself. And so this is where the forgiveness comes in later. But I guess my strategies to deal with that, Jo, would have been, I played good girl. So I was absolutely petrified of the belt, the wooden spoon, and I just kept my mouth quiet, even if I felt like I was being unjustly treated, and especially watching how Mum was treated and spoken to by Dad. We couldn't say anything. We couldn't try and defend Mum, and we couldn't defend ourselves. So to avoid all of that scenario, I just played good girl. So I guess that story has played out, and I guess even as an adult, I hate to get into trouble. I guess we all do, but I always strive to do the best I can with everything that I'm doing. And I think that stems from trying to, and also keeping secrets as well. Like we don't go to school and say, hey, this is happening at home. Or, I was so embarrassed to even, even to discuss what was happening at home, because we all like to think that home is safe and wonderful, and my home was not safe and wonderful. And so I couldn't go and tell anybody that, because it was just embarrassing, But once again, it's all about secrecy and shame and guilt, and not feeling empowered enough to speak your truth, which had been who I grew up to be for a very long time, even in adult life, until I found my voice, and I made a lot of changes in my life. Then, I just wasn't going to stand for being disrespected or treated any way that I didn't feel I deserved. Yeah.
There was a lot of pressure on the young you, and maybe even the still you, to be perfect all the time, and which is impossible, of course. And I'm so sorry that was your experience.
No, thanks, Jo. Yep. I guess it's made me have been a little bit OCD, and I just like things to be in order all the time. It makes me feel comfortable. And I know that growing up with 3 little ones who like to make messes, and as kids do, and I was always, freaking out about the mess, and everything had to be in its place, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. But I understand myself more now as an adult. I understand why I was behaving like that, and I've changed. So, yeah.
So what led you to connect with your biological mother? How did this come about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was very curious, but I wasn't about to go searching myself. I think for fear of rejection again, fear of it just not going the way I wanted, and because I'd had so much pain in my life, I didn't want to put myself out there to be exposed to any more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the legislation changed in 1984 when I was
in
19,
Victoria.
Victoria, yep. And you could access your biological. You could access information that was around at the time of your birth, whatever had been documented at the time of your birth, you could access. And my biological mother had actually gone back to the hospital I was born in, which was the Royal Women's Hospital in Carlton in Melbourne. So she wasn't in another state. Anyway, she'd gone there, and she inquired about me with the social work department. And then they sent a letter to Mum and Dad expressing that she had been in touch with them and wanted to know how I'd fared in life. And Mum and Dad sat me down after work, and they said, look, we had this letter, and I was just over the moon. Words can't describe how excited I was. I think I was more or less shocked to think that this person I'd fantasized about for so long, and mind you, I always used to tell people it was Olivia Newton-John was my mum, because I knew that she was into music, and I just love Olivia. But anyway, so I used to say that to people. So Mum and Dad asked me, would you like us to share some information? And I was like, yeah. And my father actually wrote the most beautiful letter saying how I'd been a model baby and a beautiful child, and how proud he was of me. And he read it out to me and asked, did I think it was satisfactory to send? And I was like, oh my God. And in that moment, I thought, my dad loves me,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the letter was sent, and then we got one back. And then there were about 3 or 4 letters that went backwards and forwards, all with non-identifying information at that point. So
this is all being mediated by the social worker at the hospital at the time?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was it still coming through your parents as well, your adoptive parents?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, they were just open to.
Yeah, sure.
This is where they supported this curiosity we spoke about earlier. They were fully supportive, and they were just as excited as me, I guess. And people would say to me, "Oh, isn't your mum jealous?" And I said, "No, because jealousy only happens if there's insecurity." Yeah, and mum Mum and I's relationship was just so strong and beautiful, and she never felt threatened at all. So it was really good. So after
there was a
about
few letters,
after 3 or 4 letters, I then get a letter with her name on it, and I got to read her name for the first time. And then the letters were actually direct. So they were her handwritten letters with her signature and her name. And then I was allowed to do the same. And like, when you think about it, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? That, it had to be the right time for everything to be disclosed,
Yeah.
But that's how it was. And so then there was the question, would you like to have a contact meeting? And I was just like, wow, yes. So the day came, and I went to the Royal Women's and we met.
How did that go?
Oh, gosh. I can't even describe the words. There's not one word, but there's many words, if that makes sense. And I think you'd understand. Yeah. My girlfriend drove me in to the hospital because I couldn't think straight. And I'd seen a photo of her, and I looked towards the entrance and I saw her walking in the hospital, and she walked up the stairs, and I'm like, oh my God, there she is, And so then I went up, and I was in the waiting room, and the social worker came out and she said, are you ready to meet your birth mother? And she said to me, she's already in tears. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And she opened the door, and there's this cute little lady standing there because she was quite short. And she just grabbed me and put her arms around me and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, told me how much she loved me. She called me by the names Cara and Julia, which were the names that she gave me at birth. I didn't know that I had any names. And I felt strange. I didn't feel connected to this woman at all. And I thought, am I supposed to feel connected to her? I grew within her womb. She gave birth to me. She gave me life. And I felt really guilty that I didn't feel the same way that she did, until I kind of processed the fact that she's known me forever, and I have not known her at all. So that kind of justified in my mind why I didn't feel the same. And I felt so guilty that I couldn't say I love you back straight away, because it just felt strange,
Yeah.
But the social worker was beautiful, and she made sure that we both felt comfortable with each other. And then she suggested that we go off and have lunch together and get to know each other, which we did. And and that part was just absolutely beautiful and amazing. And she lives 3 suburbs away from me.
Wow.
Unlike a lot of women who were forced to go interstate to have their babies to conceal the secrecy, she was just around the corner all this time. And so we'd meet at the local shopping centre and have lunch quite regularly. And it was beautiful. And I can remember feeling, I was 19, I was out going to discos and things, and I can remember dancing away and feeling such a high. I felt like, wow, she came looking for me after all these years, and she'd never forgotten me, and I felt so special and so happy. Yeah.
That feeling of maybe disconnection in the moment is something that probably many adopted people can identify with. Certainly I can. I remember going there, I felt like I had all the emotional parts of me packed in a bag, and I was carrying them, and my body just felt like a little disconnected from everything. And I think my mother might have felt kind of the same way at the same time, because I just felt like we were being very polite the day that we met, and it was not like I'd expected from all the, the shows that you see where everyone breaks down and
yes, no, I totally understand that.
Yeah. So as that reunion progressed, did you discover that you had any siblings, and how did things sort of go as it tracked on?
So my birth mother, she moved on in her life and married and had a daughter and a son. And when I met Lois, they were, I think, about 9 and 7 or something. And of course, I was so excited to have siblings, and I couldn't wait to meet them, and I couldn't wait to see what they looked like. And, you know, she showed me photos of them, and there were some similarities when we were babies, and I was so excited, Jo. I couldn't wait. And I think you could probably understand. I think anyone who's adopted could understand how exciting it would be to finally see someone that's genetically connected to you, you know. But unfortunately, she didn't want them to know who I was. And there were a few functions that we went to, and, you know, admittedly, I understand that for her, it would be a little confronting for children of that age to ask questions. But I kind of kept thinking, well, my adoptive parents had to explain adoption to us when we were growing up. And so I became a little bit, not resentful, but because that's pretty harsh, but I was a bit taken back, and it did kind of make me feel like she's brought me out into the open, but then she's putting me back in a box with a lid on the top, if that makes sense. And my husband was, at the time, he was very upset for me as well. We both felt it. It was almost like a rejection of some sort again, and it was almost like she was still living the shame, the guilt, the secrecy, you know. And I was still a secret. So that was really upsetting.
Yeah.
Until one day, out of the blue, she just called me and she was crying. She said, "I've just told the kids. I've just told them who you are. Come over." You know, so I was very happy to do that, and I'm glad she did. But I also felt like, you know, it would have been nice to do it a bit earlier, and I'd waited such a long time. But anyway, it happened, and I'm super, super close to her daughter. And yeah, we have a beautiful relationship. So I'm very blessed, very blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she share with you the circumstances of your conception and how you came to be adopted?
Yeah, absolutely. She was, what was she? She was nearly 21. She was 20 when she fell pregnant. She was working in Melbourne and living in Melbourne. Her parents were from a country town where her father was the bank manager. So everybody knew him, and they were all quite well-to-do. And of course, the shame and the guilt of their daughter falling pregnant out of wedlock was, you know, just the worst thing that can happen. It was like a catastrophe.
And bank managers were a big deal back in the day, weren't they? They
absolutely
were like pillars in the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she was living in a boarding house, actually. So there were people coming and going all the time. And she'd just recently broken up with a guy she'd been with for a couple of years, and she was absolutely devastated. And she met my birth father, who was a tradie, and he was just there temporarily doing some trade work. And so he then, you know, they had an interaction and then he moved on. And of course, there were no mobile phones in those days. She knew where he came from, what country town he was from, and, you know, they got to know each other, which was nice. But of course, when she discovered she was pregnant, well, there was no question in her mind. She couldn't then just tell him, and, you know, she didn't want to disrupt his life. And of course, she was told by her parents that she would just have to stay in Melbourne. Don't come home. We're cancelling your 21st birthday party. Don't come home until this is all over.
many people impacted by adoption have these incredible tales of coincidence or serendipity when they start connecting with their biological families. And you had one that led you to connecting with your father, with that tradie. Could you share that with us?
Jo, this story, people just would not believe it. And I wrote about it in my book. And I think I wrote, now read that again, because it's pretty unbelievable. I actually believe very strongly that everything happens for a reason. So my biological mother was in a Katie's shop trying on an outfit in the cubicle, and she overheard a conversation just outside the cubicle door, and the conversation was being held by the manageress of the shop and another customer. And she overheard the manageress say that her hometown was this particular hometown, and my birth mother's ears pricked up, and she stuck her head out and she said, "Excuse me, did you say you were from blah, blah, blah?" And she goes, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "Do you know a man named blah, blah, blah?" And she looked at her and she goes, "Yeah, that's my brother." And my birth mother she just couldn't believe it. She said, "Oh my God, I have to talk to him. I have to tell him something." And so I think what happened is that this was my auntie. I think she passed on the phone number or something and asked permission, do you want to hear from her or whatever. Anyway, the phone call was made. My birth mother spoke to him, and they had not seen each other since I was conceived. So this is 19 years later. And she said to him, "You may not remember me, but," and he's like, "I remember you. Oh, yeah, I remember you." And she said, "Well, I'm just ringing to let you know that we have a 19-year-old daughter."
Whoa.
And the phone, it just went silent. And she said, "Are you still there? Are you still there?" And he just goes, "Yep, where is she? I want to meet her."
Oh, wow.
And he literally came down within the month or the next week or something. It was so fast. He came down from the country to meet me. And he didn't see her again, and they've not seen each other since, but he did meet with me.
Yeah. And how did that go?
That was really cool. That was really cool because I had not a good relationship with my adoptive father.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt more of connection to him, actually. It sounds really bizarre. And he was just so jolly and loving, and, he was very emotional, and I've never seen men be emotional. My father was not emotional. My adoptive father was not emotional at all. He was hard. And this biological father of mine, he was crying, and it just made me relax more, and he was so easy to talk to, and yeah, we just talked, and it wasn't long after that he actually said to me, "You have a cousin, and he's the same age as you. Would you like to meet him?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." So he was on the phone, and then the cousin came, and we actually recognized each other, and we'd met before, which is another really weird coincidence. We met down at Phillip Island once, with other people, of course, but we recognized each other. And then it wasn't long after that my birth father had like a big party at the auntie's house, and I ended up meeting the grandmother, and cousins, aunties, uncles. Yeah, it was really special, and I felt really special. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And I'm always bowled over by these coincidences and connections that people discover And we pretty much all have these stories in one sense or another.
Yeah.
So can I ask, Alison, what these reunions with your family have brought to your life?
Yeah, look, they brought a sense of connection. They definitely brought happiness. I'm so happy. I've met a half sister on my biological father's side as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're super close too. So that's a blessing. I guess I always refer to it as a jigsaw puzzle. Life is like a jigsaw puzzle,
mm-hmm.
and all the pieces were missing. And so to create the picture of my life, I've been able to place all the pieces of the puzzle together,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the picture. It's not a perfect picture, but it's a picture. So I guess that in itself has been a beautiful thing. But not all reunions are fantastic, and things have obviously progressed a little bit and changed a little bit as well. So
yeah. I was going to ask you about that because reunions often don't have a straight trajectory, so they're not all just up and up or on, going. They're often up and down, ebbs and flows and issues that come up. Yeah. How has it been for you?
So with my birth father, when I wrote my book, when you write a book, you obviously have to get signed consent to name anyone or any circumstances that might connect them to anything. So anything identifying. And he was quite happy to allow me to use his name initially. And then he changed his mind. And I must admit, I was very upset. I was very hurt. And I thought, he's still living with guilt and shame and secrecy. So there's a big part of me that's still quite a secret in his world. He was quite happy, of course, when his family was here, but yes, there's something going on there that's still impacting him. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake, it was over 50 years ago, nearly 60 years ago, and the stigma and the shame and the guilt is still embedded into these poor people that went through this experience, and he's a beautiful man. It's just that I think society, what they placed on people, it's just so embedded into them. And it's really sad. So I'm quite sad about the fact that there's something going on that I can't be close to him. Yeah. And with my birth mother, it's sad too. It's really sad. I don't want to say anything negative about her. I feel for her, and I have so much compassion and empathy for what she's been through, and I blame society for that. I believe that she's become very overprotective, maybe a little bit too judgmental. I think she has hardened her heart, and she's almost become a little bit I don't want to use the word controlling, but she likes to take control. And I totally understand that, because she had her control removed. She had everything taken away from her when they took me from her. And so I think these women have had to overcompensate, or they've had to compensate for how they were treated. And I feel really sad that it's still having an impact on her and her relationships in her life. So I persist. I do love her. I feel for her and what she's been through. Sometimes I doubt whether she really loves me, but I'm sure she does, but it's just difficult for her to show it and express it. She read my book. She read it 3 times. She commended me on it. She was overwhelmed with how I had written it, telling me that my adoptive mother would be so proud. My adoptive mother passed in 2016.
I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, she's extremely...
Seemed like an incredible woman.
Amazing lady. Amazing. And I talk a lot about her in the book. Yeah. So, I mean, my biological mother is literally 5 minutes around the corner. We live so close. But it's a struggle. And my children, who are all adults now, they love her so much, and they've done a lot of work to understand womb trauma and the disconnection, and they fully understand, and they have a lot of empathy for her as well, and compassion. But it's difficult for her, I think. I mean, they're the only grandchildren that she has, and she's not going to have any others, but there's a bit of a disconnection between them. It was beautiful when they were growing up, you know. She was babysitting them, and she had a lot to do with their upbringing as far as being the grandmother figure. And I didn't sort of introduce her as the grandmother straight away either, which I guess was not a nice thing to do. But because my adoptive mother had never given birth, I really wanted Mum to experience the whole grandmother thing like she deserved. And so the kids had my ex-husband's mother, who was the grandmother, and my mum as the grandmother. And so, you know, for initially, my biological mother was just an amazing woman who would come and spend time with them and spoil them rotten. But, you know, I told them, of course, and they were over the moon. So there's a lot of work that I'd like to do to kind of, I don't even know if mend is the word, but yeah, there's a lot that I'd like to do. I know what it's like to lose a parent, 2 parents, and once they're gone, they're gone. You can't say things that you want to, and yeah, so that's in the plan for very near future. Yeah,
they're very complex relationships,
so complex.
And I very much empathize with you, and I just I do really appreciate how you continue to just work through things and have some positivity and know that they're complex and try and see things from the other perspective. I appreciate that about you, Alison.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you.
Alison, you have, as you mentioned, 3 beautiful adult children now. I wondered how adoption has impacted you as a mother.
Yeah, that's a really, it's beautiful. First born, when I gave birth, of course, well, going back to just being pregnant, I absolutely marveled over the miracle that was occurring of being pregnant. And I followed the pregnancy week to week with Every Woman book.
Oh, yes, I remember that book.
Everyone read that book. And I was just so aware and so conscious of the developing child within me. And I would be quite sad at times because my husband and I would marvel over the growth, and we'd both put, you know, our hands on the tummy and feel the kicking. And I thought to myself, wow, that never happened when I was in utero. There was no one marveling over me and being excited about the birth and wanting to meet me. And so, yeah, that was a little bit weird. And then giving birth, once I'd had my baby, each time I thought about what my birth mother must have gone through, and I had an emotional roller coaster, I guess, I just kept reflecting back to, what if they were taking my baby right now?
Mm-hmm.
What if they took my baby from me right now before I could see it or cuddle it? How would I feel? And I put myself in her shoes, and I was absolutely devastated, and it was awful. And yeah, each time I reflected on that scenario. Yeah, I mean, but we'll never truly know how it impacted them. We can only imagine. And the imagining was bad enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That process of being pregnant really highlights things. I can remember just thinking about if when I was pregnant with my children, just thinking about what I would have to do in my own mind to try and disconnect from those movements and that feeling in order to approach what was coming.
The inevitable.
What was coming, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we talk a lot, and I do a lot of, I've written a lot about womb trauma as well. And I think for these women who've given up babies, not given up, because we don't like to use that term, given up, because it's not done willingly, but there must have been a sense of disconnection for them to survive what was coming. And I truly feel that with my birth mother, that conscious disconnection has been the thing that's impacted her a lot. But another wonderful thing about having children and being adopted is that for the very first time in your life, you are biologically, genetically connected to this beautiful child. And it's almost like, this is mine and no one's taking it away from me. But I must say too, I was very, not overprotective, but I was very, I don't know, almost conscious of keeping my baby with me. And, my husband and I decided that for the first, before they went to school, we wouldn't put them in childcare or daycare, or we very rarely allowed people to babysit them. And he was very supportive of that. And I guess it was kind of me and maybe the womb trauma. But I just wanted to be with my babies all the time, like they were mine. And yeah, I could just wanted to feel super, super connected and keep that connection. And yeah, it was just beautiful. And now I'm so close. We're very, very close. And yeah, it's just beautiful. So I'm blessed, absolutely blessed.
So you wrote your beautiful book, Forced Adoption, a Memoir. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, the subtitle is, of course, A Journey of Discovery, Forgiveness and Healing. So I had always been asked the same questions. Adoption always seemed to come up in conversation when I was meeting new people, and the questions were always the same. And then when I started to tell them about my stories, everyone would say, oh my God, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And then, what was it, 2 years ago? I just thought, I felt a bit stagnant in my life, I guess. I'm a carer. I work with age and disability. And so my thing has always been healing and helping people. And I'm a massage therapist as well. And I just thought I needed to do more. I felt like something needed to be done. And then I just got, I'm a bit spiritual, and I got this direct message saying, write your book, tell your story. And I'm like, what? And they said, write your book. And I'm like, but I don't know how to write a book. How do I write a book? And then I clearly heard them say, start from the beginning, tell it as it happened. And so I started jotting down, just points, things that happened. And I thought, I'm going to do this. And then I thought, I really want to do this because I want to share my story. I want to share about the healing. So many adoptees find it difficult to move forward in life. And look, I'm one of 4 two of the others haven't fared well in life at all. But I wanted to kind of let people know that there is a path you can take. And I chose not to be a victim. And I chose to see the good and not just the bad, and focus on the good. And I think that's what I've tried to portray in the book. The book's very revealing. There's a lot of trauma that's in the book. But my message is really just about healing and forgiveness. And I think you definitely cannot have healing unless you have forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean, oh, it's okay, you've done that to me. It's just like, okay, I can look beyond you and see why you behave like that. And if I think, by having a perspective of, well, you were traumatized. I mean, it's not justifying their behavior at all, but it's what's needed. It was what was needed for me to heal. I have a sister who had exactly the same upbringing as me. We had the same traumas, the same abuse, and she chose another path, which was drug and alcohol addiction. And she is currently at the end of her life. She's 5 years younger than me, but the addiction has been so severe that she just couldn't beat it. And she actually found her birth mother, but found that both her birth mother and father had, after they'd relinquished her, they got married and had 3 more children. And when she found them, they rejected her, which led to more trauma for her, which was really sad. And I know there's many stories out there like that. And that really, it's very sad. It's very sad. But this is about a positive story. So yeah, I wanted to write my book. And also another main reason was to educate people, let them see what the birth mothers went through. People are shocked. People are so shocked to learn that the government and the churches and, these places put so much shame and guilt on women just because they weren't married.
I'm often surprised that people are shocked, like people my age and older, that they are shocked, because I can even remember when I was a teenager, the stigma that still was around, having children outside of marriage, even though by that time it was, supported by government payments and that kind of thing. I still remember the fear of God being put into me about, having a child outside of marriage.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm surprised when people go, oh, I can't believe that. It's like, wow, you can't even remember what it was like for us as teenagers,
Yeah. And also I wanted people to understand us adoptees, growing up without an identity, not knowing where the color of our skin comes from or our eyes or, just we all know as adoptees what that's like, not knowing. And that comes with a whole lot of other things and people don't understand us. And so I really wanted people who read my book to understand what we went through and what we still are going through. Yeah.
That, so I was going to ask, I guess, how has writing helped you understand your experience? And I'm going to add an extra layer to that, I think, just from what we were talking about, is that for me, writing, like I had a lot of trouble figuring out who I was in my identity, what I liked, what I, for many number of reasons, and adoption at the core of it. what do I like, what don't I like, who am I? And writing helped me kind of figure that out and understand my experience. So how did it work for you?
I totally agree with you. It's like being on the outside and looking in.
Mm.
And I think because with my book, I wrote it all myself. There was no editor. And I rewrote it, and I wrote it, and I rewrote it, and I dreamt about it, rewriting it and rewriting it. And so the story, my story, became a story. And I could really look at all the chapters and see them differently. Like, it's really hard to explain. You might understand what I'm trying to say. Very cathartic, very reflective. It gave me time to really reflect about what I was writing and how those things impacted me. I would read a chapter after I'd written it, and I was actually thinking, what, did I actually write that? And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, okay. So it really helped me. I don't know, it just really helped me. I think it's an amazing reflection and more of an acceptance too. I think I was able to accept myself a bit more. And as I was writing, Jo, I did a lot of research. So I researched more about womb trauma and love languages and how the attachment styles are developed and how important those attachment styles are, to help develop a healthy, stable human being. And of course, us adoptees, we had no attachment. As soon as there's a birth, that touch, that familiar voice, that mother and baby, I mean, that was severed. And for me, it was 2 weeks in a crib in a hospital bed with different nurses picking me up and feeding me and putting me back down. And so there was no attachments. Those attachment styles were not developed. And then you're in the arms of a total stranger and expected to create those attachments. So as I was writing, I would research all these different aspects and all the different things that had affected me growing up, so that I actually got to understand more of myself and my story. And I stopped being so hard on myself, because I was quite, I guess there was a sense of self-judgment, insecurities about the way I behaved, but I understood more about my behavior and how I was, like even growing up and looking at this obsession that I had with, trying to look like someone, or this obsession about fitting in and doing anything possible to fit in with a group so that I wasn't on the outer and being left out or rejected, because those rejection, abandonment issues, they reside within us. And I got to understand those issues more as well.
Yeah.
So I think writing is brilliant. And actually, I would love to write another book, and I'd love to, write other people's stories. Sometimes people don't have the skills or the capacity to actually sit and write. But if I could write for them on their behalf, just getting their story out and expressing and releasing is so important when it comes to healing. So I think for me, that's definitely helped with the healing as well.
I love that. And I love that it's allowed you to view yourself with more kindness. And I certainly feel that with myself, now when I think, oh man, geez, I'm really crap at relationships, or, see how I'm taking things the wrong way or whatever, I think, you're kind of doing the best that you can, and you've done all right. Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Look, where can our listeners find your book?
Balboa website. It's Amazon, Noble and Barnes. It's on so many of those sites. But preferably Balboa because the royalties are a bit better.
So what's the website address for that? We'll put it up on our podcast notes page as well, but if you could just read it out.
I don't have it with me.
That's all right. That's all right. What we'll do is we'll make sure that we put it in the notes, and we'll put it on our podcast notes page and on our social media when we put it out.
Yeah, that would be great. Yes. But for anyone who's thinking about writing their memoir, I would highly recommend. It's a cathartic and healing experience. And even if you just write it for yourself, it doesn't have to be written to be publicized, but just writing is so wonderful. Yeah.
Look, Alison, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And like I said, I loved reading your book, and, it's probably lost me some friendships over the weekend, but couldn't put it down. And I know that hearing your story is going to help others.
I really hope so. I really do. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
I think what you do is absolutely wonderful. So hats off to you, Jo. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I said, I'll post some links to Alison's book on our podcast notes page, and keep an eye on our Facebook as well. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. And if you have a story that you'd like to share with us and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, just jump onto the main podcast page of the Jigsaw Queensland website and complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. And just note that Adopt Perspective can be listened to by people all over the world. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com, and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number, and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you are calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.